Welcome to the Veil of Truth, your gateway to uncovering hidden insights and illuminating mysteries. I'm thrilled you've joined our global community. Whether you're watching from a bustling city skyline or a quiet countryside, we're glad you're here. Globe showing Europe, Africa, so tell me, where are you tuning in from today? Chapter 1: A Country Gathering. Hercule Poirot had, by inclination, little love for the damp greyness of the English countryside. He admired the precision of a well-laid lawn, yes, and the symmetry of clipped hedges, but he found little to admire in muddy lanes, draughty windows, and the eternal threat of rain. Yet, for friendship's sake, even the greatest detective must sometimes sacrifice comfort. Thus it was that Poirot found himself jolting along in Colonel Lace's motorcar, bound for Greystone Manor, where a gathering of family and friends was to mark the 50th birthday of Sir Geoffrey Armitage. The manor itself, when it came into view, was of a kind that delighted the English heart: solid stone, ivy climbing the front, a scattering of gables and tall chimneys. To Poirot's eye, it was a little too sprawling, a little too uneven, but he made no complaint. The Colonel, stout and cheerful at the wheel, declared with satisfaction, "There we are, Poirot, Greystone. A fine place, eh? The Armitages have had it in the family since Cromwell's day. You'll like Geoffrey, fellow of good sense. Not like his boy, though, no, you'll see soon enough." Poirot smiled faintly. He had learned that the English, when they mentioned family, could seldom resist a note of disapproval. He tucked his hands neatly on the head of his cane, reflecting that the weekend might prove more diverting than he had expected. They were greeted by a butler whose air was of solemn efficiency, and conducted to the great hall, where a fire crackled and voices rose in laughter. Poirot's entrance, though modest, did not go unnoticed. His small stature, the immaculate moustache, the precise bow with which he acknowledged the company, all gave him an air at once foreign and commanding. Sir Geoffrey himself advanced, a tall man with thinning hair and a ruddy complexion, his manner hearty. "Colonel! And you must be Monsieur Poirot. My house is honoured. I trust you will forgive the noise. My children are determined to make me feel younger than I am." There was indeed noise. A piano played somewhere in the drawing-room, mingled with bursts of laughter. Servants passed among the company with trays of champagne and sherry. Poirot took in every detail with the discreet thoroughness that was his habit: the flushed cheek of a young man by the hearth, the nervous flutter of a woman's hand as she adjusted her necklace, the glance exchanged between two guests, swiftly averted. Introductions followed. There was Clara Armitage, Sir Geoffrey's daughter, pale and delicate, with eyes that seemed always half-shadowed by thought. Beside her stood James Radford, a solicitor of perhaps 30, with a firm jaw and a manner a shade too eager to please. Then came Major Blackwood, moustached, sunburnt, his bearing unmistakably military. And finally, Oliver Trent, the friend of the family who seemed at the centre of every burst of laughter. Oliver was young, fair-haired, with the careless charm of one accustomed to indulgence. He pressed a glass into Poirot's hand, declaring in tones too loud, "To the great detective! I have heard of you, sir. Oh yes, the Belgian genius. You must find our little family dreadfully dull. I hope someone will commit a murder just to amuse you." The remark drew scandalized titters. Poirot inclined his head gravely. "Monsieur, let us hope that your wish does not come true. I find my happiness in peace, not in crime." Yet, even as he spoke, he noted the faint tightening of Clara's lips, the swift glance of James Radford towards the floor. To Poirot, these were not meaningless gestures. Human beings, he often said, were like books: one must learn to read them. The evening progressed with the usual mixture of pleasantries and gossip. Dinner was served with suitable formality, the table gleaming with silver and crystal. Poirot, seated between Clara and the Colonel, observed the interplay of conversation with quiet interest. Oliver drank freely, yet seemed not drunk. His eyes were bright, his wit quick, though edged at times with cruelty. He teased Clara about her melancholy looks, pressed James to recount a dull legal case, and made a jest at Major Blackwood's expense that left the latter red-faced. Sir Geoffrey rebuked him mildly. "Enough, Oliver. It is my birthday, not your stage." But Oliver only laughed and drank again. By the time dessert was served, the company had grown louder, freer. Poirot, sipping his coffee, felt a faint unease. The gaiety seemed strained, forced. Beneath it, he sensed tensions, the stiffness with which James endured Oliver's banter, the way Clara's hands trembled as she lifted her spoon, the silence of Major Blackwood, who stared fixedly at his plate. At last, the moment of the toast arrived. The butler entered with fresh bottles of champagne, and glasses were filled. Oliver, with exaggerated ceremony, seized one bottle and insisted on pouring for those nearest him. To Sir Geoffrey, he cried, "May he live forever, though heaven knows it will be duller for the rest of us." Laughter followed, though not all of it genuine. Poirot raised his glass politely. Yet he could not help observing a curious thing. When Oliver at last poured for himself, the liquid in his glass seemed slightly clouded, as though not perfectly clear. Poirot, whose eye missed nothing, filed the detail quietly in his mind. The toast was drunk, voices rang out, and the evening drew towards its end. One by one the guests excused themselves, until only a few remained in the hall. Oliver, his cheeks flushed, declared he would drive himself back to the lodgings he had taken in the village. "Oliver, don't be foolish," Sir Geoffrey protested. "Stay the night. There are rooms enough." But Oliver only laughed and clapped his host on the shoulder. "I'm steady as a rock, sir. Don't you worry. I could drive this lane blindfold." He seized his coat, ignored Clara's anxious plea, and swaggered out into the night. It was perhaps an hour later when the dreadful news arrived. A farmhand, hurrying up the lane, brought word that a motorcar had crashed against the great elm by the crossroads. The car was Oliver's. He was found inside, broken and lifeless. A hush fell upon Greystone Manor. Clara gave a cry and collapsed into James Radford's arms. Major Blackwood muttered something under his breath. Sir Geoffrey, face ashen, turned away. Only Poirot remained still, his eyes narrowed, his fingers smoothing his moustache. Tragic accident, yes. Yet in his mind's eye he saw again the glass of champagne, faintly clouded. He recalled also the eagerness with which Oliver's companions had pressed him to drink, though he had first refused. Accident or design? Poirot, though silent, felt the stirrings of suspicion. The little grey cells had begun their work. Chapter 2, Whispers of Doubt. The following morning dawned grey and cold, the manor cloaked in a damp mist that hung low over the lawns. The great elm by the crossroads, against which Oliver Trent's motorcar had crashed, loomed in everyone's minds like a sinister monument. Word of the tragedy had travelled swiftly through the village, and by breakfast, the household of Greystone Manor was subdued, voices hushed, eyes ringed with sleeplessness. Hercule Poirot entered the dining room with his usual neatness, every crease in his suit precise, every hair in place. He accepted a modest plate of eggs and toast, though he ate more for form than for appetite. His gaze, sharp and calculating, moved from one face to another as the guests sat about the long table. Sir Geoffrey, his features drawn, made a valiant attempt at civility, though his hand trembled slightly as he buttered his toast. Clara was pale as ivory, her eyes red-rimmed, though she tried to engage her father with soft words. James Radford avoided both Clara's gaze and Sir Geoffrey's, keeping his attention fixed upon the newspaper before him, though Poirot noticed he had not turned a page in 20 minutes. Major Blackwood ate with mechanical efficiency, his military training permitting no lapse in routine, yet his jaw was clenched so tightly that a muscle in his cheek jumped at intervals. The butler, moving with quiet dignity, cleared and replaced dishes, but his eyes, too, betrayed unease. The whole household seemed to breathe under the weight of unspoken thought. It was Sir Geoffrey who broke the silence. A shocking business, he said hoarsely, staring into his coffee. My poor boy. Such promise, such promise. He sighed heavily, though Poirot could not help but note the faint ambiguity in his tone, as though the promise spoken of were more dutifully declared than truly believed. Colonel Lacey murmured a word of sympathy, but it was Clara who spoke next, her voice low and trembling. He should never have been allowed to drive last night, she said. I told him, oh, I begged him, to stay here. But he laughed at me. James Radford, still with eyes on the paper, muttered, he was not a man to be guided by reason. Poirot stirred his coffee gently, his expression unreadable. At length, he addressed the table in his courteous manner. It is indeed most tragic, mademoiselle, he said softly to Clara. Yet, forgive me, one thing puzzles me. When last I saw Monsieur Trent, he was in spirits, yes, but not so far gone as to be incapable. And yet, so soon after, he meets with death upon the road. Is it not curious? Sir Geoffrey frowned. Are you suggesting negligence, Monsieur Poirot? The boy had drunk more than was wise. That is the long and short of it. Nothing mysterious. Perhaps, said Poirot gently. Yet I am one who does not so easily accept appearances. I find them often misleading. It is my nature, you understand. His words were met with silence. James Radford cleared his throat and rose abruptly, excusing himself with some mutter about correspondence. Clara watched him leave, then lowered her eyes, her hands twisting in her lap. It was not long after breakfast that Poirot found himself strolling in the misty garden with Clara. She had sought him out, her manner nervous, as though compelled by some inner urgency. Monsieur Poirot, she began, haltingly, you think it was more than an accident, do you not? Poirot inclined his head slightly. I think, mademoiselle, that there are circumstances which invite a closer examination. For example, last night your brother at first declined more wine, did he not? Yet he was persuaded to drink. You recall this? Clara's lips trembled. Yes. He said he'd had enough, but James, Mr. Radford, pressed him. Said it was father's birthday and he must join the final toast. Oliver gave in, of course. He never liked to be thought unsociable. Just so, murmured Poirot. And you, mademoiselle, you seemed distressed even before your brother departed. Was it only fear for his safety? She hesitated. Her eyes darted to the windows of the manor, as though to assure herself they were unobserved. Then she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. Oliver, he was reckless in more than drink. He threatened things, horrible things. He told me he would expose father's past if father did not give him more money. He laughed at me when I pleaded with him to stop. He said he would drag us all into shame if it suited him. Poirot regarded her keenly. And what is this past of your father's? Her face flushed with distress. I cannot say. It is not only my secret, you understand? If it came out, it would ruin him. Father has enemies enough without, she broke off, shivering. Poirot laid a gentle hand on her arm. Courage, mademoiselle. Say nothing now that would bring you pain. I ask only that you do not conceal from me if you know something of importance. Even the smallest detail, it may serve. Clara nodded miserably. I will try, Monsieur Poirot. But please, if there is investigation, spare father's name if you can. He could not bear the disgrace. Poirot bowed gravely. I give no promises until I know the truth. But I assure you, I have no wish to wound the innocent. When they re-entered the house, Poirot's sharp ears caught a whisper at the far end of the corridor. It was Clara again, speaking hurriedly to James Radford, who had just emerged from the library. Poirot paused, unseen, and listened. It must be kept quiet, Clara was saying urgently. For father's sake, James, promise me you will say nothing. Radford's reply was low, strained. I promise, but we cannot keep it hidden forever. Someone will ask questions. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Here, indeed, was confirmation of his instinct. There was something more beneath Oliver Trent's death than careless drinking and reckless driving. Later that day, the local constable arrived to take statements. He was a stout, red-faced man, kindly but unimaginative, and he treated the matter as a closed case before the ink of his report had dried. Clear enough, he declared to Poirot. The young fellow was foxed, lost control, and met his end. Sad business, but not uncommon. Poirot bowed politely, but in his mind, he rejected the simple conclusion. For him, the smallest detail had weight, the cloudiness of the wine, the eagerness with which Oliver had been urged to drink, the whispered talk of family shame. No, this was no ordinary accident. This was a story written in shadow, and Poirot, with his little grey cells, was already tracing the outlines of a darker truth. As the constable departed, Poirot lingered in the hall, gazing at the empty space where Oliver had laughed so boisterously the night before. A strange silence hung there now, as though the house itself kept its secrets. Poirot murmured softly to himself. Always, it is in the whispers that the truth hides. And the whispers, they are already loud enough for Poirot to hear. Chapter 3, Shadows Among Friends. That afternoon the sky remained stubbornly grey, the mist lingering about the gardens like a veil that refused to lift. The household at Greystone Manor moved with the subdued air of a place in mourning, though beneath the solemn faces, Hercule Poirot sensed currents of unease. Grief is one thing, he reflected, but here there was something more, a tension, a watchfulness, as though each person were careful of what might be observed. Poirot, never one to waste an opportunity, set about his inquiries with the utmost delicacy. It was his habit not to confront but to converse, to let people speak freely while he listened with exquisite attention. In the smallest gesture, the slightest hesitation, he found meaning. He began with Major Blackwood, whom he found in the billiards room, practicing his shots with an energy that suggested agitation rather than leisure. The Major greeted him stiffly, chalking his cue with unnecessary vigor. Terrible business, Poirot. Terrible. The lad had his faults, of course, but still, it's no way to go. Rotten luck. Poirot's eyes twinkled gently. Indeed, Major. Yet you are not one, I think, who puts all down to luck. You are a man of discipline, of order. You prefer causes and effects. The Major gave a grunt, lining up another shot. You're right there. The boy was reckless, I'll say that much. Cards, drink, women, it was all a game to him. I told him more than once he'd end badly if he didn't change his ways. But he only laughed in my face. Perhaps, then, you did not like him. The Major's ball clicked hard against its target, sending it spinning. Like him? I wouldn't say that. But I pitied him. He had no self-control. A weak fellow, though clever enough in his fashion. And a scoundrel at the card table, if you ask me. Poirot raised his brows. Ah? You believe he did not play fair? I don't just believe it. I know it. He marked the cards. Not always, but often enough. I lost a good sum to him, though I recovered part of it later. I told him if he tried it again, I'd thrash him. He only laughed. Said I wouldn't dare. The Major turned abruptly, his face flushed. You're not suggesting? I may have disliked the boy, but murder? No, sir. Not my way. I fight my battles above board. Poirot inclined his head, his tone soothing. Mais bien, sir, Major. I accuse no one. I merely seek to understand. Always, it is important to see the full picture. Leaving the billiards room, Poirot reflected that resentment over gambling debts was indeed a motive, but not yet a convincing one. It was one piece in the puzzle, no more. His next conversation was with James Radford, the young solicitor, whom he discovered in the library surrounded by books he was not reading. Radford rose quickly when Poirot entered, his expression guarded. "Monsieur Poirot, I suppose you are here on behalf of the family." "To give comfort, perhaps." Poirot smiled faintly. "Comfort, yes. And also clarity. It is my nature, you see, to ask questions. To arrange the facts in order so that the truth may be seen." Radford hesitated, then gestured to a chair. "Very well. What would you know?" Poirot seated himself neatly, folding his hands. "Tell me, monsieur, you were close to Oliver Trent, were you not?" Radford gave a short laugh without humor. "Close? I tolerated him, that is all. He was useful to me at one time. We had business together. But it soured. He was unreliable, deceitful. I should never have trusted him. And yet you poured his final glass last night." Radford stiffened, his eyes narrowing. "What of it?" "He asked me to. The butler was busy, and it was a birthday toast." "You're not implying?" Poirot raised a placating hand. Non, I imply nothing. But such details, they interest me. Always, in such cases, it is the small things that matter." Radford's mouth tightened. "Well, if you must know, Oliver owed me money. He borrowed against a venture that never came to pass, and when I pressed him, he laughed. He said I should be grateful for the chance to associate with him. He was charming, yes, but careless, irresponsible. And dangerous, in his way." "Dangerous, monsieur?" Radford leaned forward, lowering his voice. He had a talent for uncovering secrets, and for using them. Blackmail is an ugly word, but it was very like that. He hinted to me that he knew things about Sir Geoffrey, things that could ruin him. He hinted he might tell them, unless, he broke off abruptly, realizing he had said too much. "I have already spoken more than I should. It is a family matter." Poirot nodded gravely. "I understand. Family honor, it is a delicate thing. Yet consider, sometimes the silence, it can do more harm than the truth." Radford said nothing further, and Poirot, recognizing the limit of what could be gained for now, withdrew. Finally, he sought out Clara, whom he found in the morning room, gazing through the misted windows at the sodden garden. She started as he entered, then offered a wan smile. "You must think us a dreadful family, Monsieur Poirot. Secrets, quarrels, debts, it all sounds so sordid." Poirot's eyes softened. "Mademoiselle, every family has its shadows. But sometimes, in the shadow, the truth is hiding." She gave a small, bitter laugh. "Oliver was always reckless. He thought himself untouchable. But he was cruel, too. He enjoyed hurting people. He threatened me, Monsieur Poirot. He said if father did not give him more money, he would disgrace us all." "You feared him." "I pitied him," she said softly. "But yes, I feared him as well. He could be charming, but underneath, he was dangerous." Poirot studied her pale face, her trembling hands. Was it grief, or guilt? He stored the observation away. When at last Poirot returned to his own room, he sat for some time in thought. 3 separate conversations, 3 separate resentments. The major cheated at cards, the solicitor cheated in business, the sister threatened with shame. Each had reason to wish Oliver gone. Each had opportunity. Yet motive alone is not enough, Poirot reminded himself. One must consider means, an opportunity, and above all, the psychology. Who had the daring, the calmness of mind, to slip something into Oliver's glass, knowing he would then take to the road in a drugged state? Poirot rose, smoothing his moustache. He did not yet know the answer, but the pattern was forming. And he, Hercule Poirot, would see it through. Chapter 4: A Toast Reconsidered. The mist had at last begun to lift, though the day remained pale and cheerless. Hercule Poirot, however, was content. He had spent the morning in quiet reflection, arranging in his mind the fragments of observation he had gathered. Now, as he descended the staircase into the great hall of Greystone Manor, he was prepared to begin what he considered the most delicate and vital stage of any investigation, the reconstruction. For Poirot, memory was a theatre in which he could replay each scene at will. He did not merely recall, he relived, placing every gesture, every word, every glance in its proper place. And so, standing by the great hearth where the final toast had been drunk, Poirot allowed the scene of the previous night to unfold once more before his inner eye. The company gathered, glasses raised. The butler moved discreetly among them, filling each crystal flute with champagne. Yet one detail distinguished itself, gleaming in Poirot's memory like a small but telling clue. When Oliver Trent's turn came, it was not the butler who poured, but James Radford. Curious, that, Poirot murmured aloud, his eyes narrowing. Why should Monsieur Radford insist upon serving Oliver when the servant was ready at hand? It is a small act, but it is in such small acts that truth reveals itself. He stepped closer to the sideboard, upon which the remaining bottles still rested, though much reduced in number. Lifting one delicately, Poirot held it up to the light. The golden liquid within glowed, but as he tilted the glass, he thought he detected the faintest haze. His lips pursed in satisfaction. Clouded, he said softly. Not in the manner of poor keeping, no. But as though something had been added. Something that did not wholly dissolve. He replaced the bottle precisely, then called for the butler, a tall, grave man named Benson who carried his duties with the solemnity of a priest at altar. Benson, Poirot said with a gentle smile, it is of interest to me, the serving of the champagne last night. Tell me, you recall it well. Yes, sir, Benson replied with dignity. It was near midnight when Sir Geoffrey asked for the bottles to be brought in. 2 fresh bottles were opened in my presence. I poured for most of the guests myself. But Mr. Radford, well, he took it upon himself to pour for Mr. Trent. I thought it odd, but said nothing. Guests will do as they please. Poirot nodded thoughtfully. Indeed. And these bottles, you are quite sure they had not been tampered with beforehand? Quite sure, sir. They were kept in the cellar, under my charge. Sealed until I opened them in the drawing room. I saw nothing unusual. Merci, Benson. You are most helpful. When the butler had gone, Poirot lingered beside the bottles, his mind turning over possibilities. If the bottles had been pure when opened, then any addition must have been made afterwards, and only to Oliver's glass. That meant the act was deliberate, not a matter of chance. Later, in the drawing room, Poirot sat with Colonel Lacey, who was polishing his spectacles with a large handkerchief. The colonel, though no detective, had a soldier's keen eye for order and a natural respect for Poirot's methods. You're working at something, Poirot, he said, peering at him. Out with it, man. Poirot spread his hands. It is simple, mon ami. I consider again the toast. Who poured, who drank, who hesitated? You recall, do you not, that Oliver first declined another glass? He said, no more for me, I have had enough. Yet he was persuaded. Persuaded by whom? The colonel frowned. Radford, wasn't it? Said he must join in the birthday toast. Just so. And so, against his own inclination, Oliver accepted. Voila, a detail that might appear small, but is in truth most important. For what does it show? That Oliver did not seek the fatal glass. It was placed before him. Colonel Lacey looked troubled. But surely you're not suggesting deliberate harm? These are his friends, his family. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Colonel, it is often among friends and family that one finds the bitterest motives. Money, reputation, honor, such things weigh heavily. And Oliver, it seems, had the talent for making enemies. The Colonel shook his head. It doesn't sit right, Poirot. If anyone wanted to do the fellow in, there are simpler ways than slipping something in his champagne. Poirot smiled faintly. Ah, but consider, my friend, what could be more convenient than an accident? A young man, reckless, fond of drink, takes the wheel of his motorcar after too many toasts. He crashes, alas, a tragedy, but one so natural that no suspicion falls. Who would think to question it? Only Hercule Poirot, who notices a clouded glass. He leaned forward, his voice low and intent. It was no poison of violence, no instant death. None, it was subtle, a sedative, perhaps. Enough to render the limbs heavy, the mind clouded. Enough to ensure that once he took the road, disaster must follow. The Colonel gave a low whistle. You mean to say it was planned from the start? That someone here meant Oliver to die? Poirot inclined his head gravely. It is what I suspect. But suspicion is not proof. To prove, I must have facts, and psychology. Always, it is the mind of the criminal that reveals him. Later that day, Poirot contrived to speak with Sir Geoffrey himself in the study. The master of Greystone looked years older than he had at his birthday supper. He sat slumped in a leather chair, a decanter at his elbow, though his glass remained untouched. Poirot, he said heavily, you are investigating, are you not? I can see it in your eyes. You believe this was no mere accident. Poirot bowed his head. Sir Geoffrey, it is my duty to seek the truth. And yes, I believe Oliver's death bears marks of design. I ask you, therefore, did your son have enemies strong enough to wish him gone? Sir Geoffrey gave a weary sigh. Enemies? He made them wherever he went. He was charming, yes, but careless. He gambled, he borrowed, he deceived. He quarrelled with me only last week, demanding money I could not give. But enemies? To kill him? No. I cannot believe it. Poirot's gaze was steady. And yet, it is often those closest who strike when pride, or shame, or ruin is threatened. Forgive me, sir, but was your son in possession of some knowledge, something dangerous, that he might use against you? Sir Geoffrey's face hardened, and for a moment Poirot thought he would refuse to speak. Then, with an effort, the man shook his head. If he knew anything, he kept it to himself. And if he threatened, it was only bluster. No, Poirot, I will not drag the family name through scandal. Let it remain an accident. That is best. Poirot bowed slightly, concealing his thoughts. But within, his conviction deepened. Secrets, whispered in corridors, a father's shame, a sister's terror, a friend's humiliation, these were not the ingredients of mere accident. As he left the study, Poirot murmured to himself. The toast, it was not of friendship, but of doom. One glass among many, and yet it bore the mark of murder. And to know who placed it in his hand, that is the question that remains. Chapter 5, The Net Tightens. The days at Greystone Manor passed with heavy slowness, as though time itself moved cautiously within its sombre walls. Outside, the September air hung damp with drizzle. Inside, whispers and watchful eyes filled the corridors. The official inquest had been scheduled, and the local constable considered the matter all but settled. Yet Hercule Poirot, whose little grey cells refused to rest, knew otherwise. He felt it was now time to cast his net more tightly. To listen, to prod, and to see who flinched. For in crime, as in fishing, the guilty cannot resist betraying themselves when the line is pulled. Poirot and Clara. His first call was upon Clara. He found her in the morning room again, pale but composed, her embroidery frame resting untouched on her lap. She looked up as he entered, her eyes widening with a mixture of relief and dread. "Monsieur Poirot, have you learned anything?" "Some things," Poirot replied gently, seating himself opposite. "But not yet the whole. Mademoiselle, forgive me, but I must ask directly, how far would your brother have gone in his threats? Would he truly have exposed your father?" Clara's hands clenched upon the embroidery silks. "Oliver was reckless, cruel even. He enjoyed frightening us. He said he would tell the world. He said he had letters, proof of something from years ago." "Proof?" Poirot leaned forward, moustaches twitching. "Proof is a strong word. And you believed him?" She hesitated, then whispered, "Yes. He always knew more than he should. He had a way of prying." "Then," said Poirot softly, "you had every reason to silence him." Her eyes widened in horror. "You think I?" "No, Monsieur Poirot. Whatever he threatened, he was still my brother. I wanted to protect father, not harm Oliver." Poirot observed her trembling hands, the anguish in her voice. He did not pronounce judgment, but quietly marked what he had seen: desperation, fear, perhaps guilt. Poirot and Radford. James Radford was next. The solicitor had taken refuge in the library, where he was pretending to read but in truth brooding over the fire. Poirot approached him with courtesy, yet firmness. "Ah, Monsieur Radford, a moment, if you please. It concerns the glass you poured for Oliver Trent." Radford stiffened. "We've been over this." It was nothing, simple courtesy. Perhaps. Yet it was only his glass that was clouded. That, I think, is not courtesy but design. Radford's colour rose. "Are you accusing me?" Poirot raised a hand. "I accuse no one. I only seek to understand. But consider, Oliver owed you money. He had cheated you in business, had he not? And worse, he had threatened exposure, which could have damaged not only you, but Sir Geoffrey. You had cause, monsieur, and the moment. Do not think it escapes me." Radford's jaw tightened. "You speak of motives, Poirot. Everyone in this house had reason to dislike Oliver. Even his own father, perhaps. But dislike is not murder." Poirot's eyes glittered. "Dislike, no. But fear? Fear is stronger. And I think you were afraid of him." Radford said nothing. He turned sharply away, staring into the fire as though it might consume his thoughts. Poirot rose quietly. He had seen enough, the guilt of a man cornered, whether by crime or by conscience. Poirot and Major Blackwood. In the billiards room, Major Blackwood was once again at the table, but his shots were wild and careless, unlike the crisp precision of a soldier. Poirot watched a moment, then spoke. "Major, you play today without your usual steadiness. Is it the nerves, perhaps?" The Major slammed his cue down. "Damn it, Poirot, you're sniffing round us like a terrier. What are you getting at? You think one of us slipped something into Oliver's drink? Well, it wasn't me. I told you, I settle my accounts man to man." Poirot raised his brows. "Accounts? Then you admit you had them to settle?" The Major scowled. "Yes, I lost money to him. More than I could afford. He marked the cards, I'm sure of it. I told him he'd answer for it if he tried it again. But murder? No, sir. That's not my game." Poirot regarded him steadily. "Perhaps not. But threats, they can escalate. Suppose you feared exposure, not for yourself, but for another? Did you see Oliver as a danger to the family you admire? The Major gave a start, then recovered. You twist words, Poirot. I won't stand for it. He stalked from the room, his boots ringing against the tiles. Poirot permitted himself a small smile. Ah, when the net is drawn, each fish struggles in its own way. That one, he thrashes. Another, he sinks silent. Each reaction tells me more than a confession. Sir Geoffrey. That evening Poirot sought Sir Geoffrey in his study. The master of Greystone sat with his head in his hands, the fire casting deep shadows across his weary face. Sir Geoffrey, Poirot began, I must press you. Your son threatened you. Your daughter admits as much. Was it true? Sir Geoffrey's shoulders stiffened. I will not speak of it. The past is mine, not the world's. If Oliver had lived, perhaps he would have blustered. But he is gone now. Let him rest. Poirot's tone softened. Yet you see, monsieur, he does not rest. His death is no accident. Someone here took steps to silence him forever. Unless I find who, suspicion may fall upon you. That would be cruelly unjust, do you not agree? Think that I... Poirot inclined his head gravely. The possibility exists. That is why I must know the truth. If there was a secret, I will discover it. Better that you speak to me freely, than that I uncover it through others. But Sir Geoffrey shook his head stubbornly. No. My honor, my family's name, those I must guard. If that means enduring suspicion, so be it. Poirot bowed slightly. Very well. But remember, monsieur, secrets are like shadows, they grow longer in the dusk, not shorter. Poirot alone. When at last he retired to his room, Poirot sat by the window, gazing out into the rain-slicked night. The house was silent, save for the occasional creak of timber, as though even its walls carried the burden of hidden things. He reviewed the day's progress. Clara, fearful, desperate, perhaps capable in her anguish. Radford, angry, cornered, and with the clearest opportunity. Major Blackwood, resentful, impetuous, yet claiming honor. Sir Geoffrey, bound by secrecy, his silence perhaps more dangerous than any confession. All had motive, Poirot murmured to himself. All had cause. But only one had the mind to conceive such a subtle plan, not to strike openly, but to disguise death in the form of accident. To drug, not to poison outright. To kill, but without raising suspicion. Which one, then? He tapped his temple. The answer lies not in the accident itself, but in psychology. Who among them thinks in such a way? Who acts with calculation, with foresight? Poirot's little grey cell stirred restlessly. The net was tightening, yes, but the fish remained elusive. Yet he felt the moment approaching when all would be clear. One more detail, one more slip, and the mask would fall. Patience, Hercule, he whispered. Patience, and precision. The truth, it will not hide forever. Chapter 6, The Gathering Storm. Greystone Manor seemed to absorb the gloom of the late September sky. Rain fell in relentless sheets, drumming against the leaded panes, while the wind rattled the ivy that clung to the ancient walls. To those within, it felt less like a country house and more like a fortress in which they were confined, each suspect forced to endure the other's company, watched over by the small, keen eyes of Hercule Poirot. The atmosphere at breakfast was strained. Conversation faltered, forks clattered against china. Clara's hand shook so badly she spilled her tea, while Major Blackwood snapped at Benson for the smallest delay. Radford spoke little, his lips pressed thin, his gaze never far from Poirot. And Sir Geoffrey, gaunt and weary, sat in silence, as if carved from stone. Poirot, however, appeared at ease. He buttered his toast with precision, sipped his chocolate with relish, and remarked upon the weather as though it were the most natural of topics. Yet all the while, he observed. He saw Clara's downcast eyes, the Major's restless movements, Radford's clenched jaw. The storm outside had its counterpart within. Poirot's announcement. At last Poirot set down his cup and cleared his throat. "My friends," he said, his voice calm yet carrying. "You are no doubt wondering why I remain here, when the world outside has accepted the death of Monsieur Oliver Trent as an unfortunate accident. But I, Hercule Poirot, cannot so easily accept. I believe, no, I know, that there is more to it." Clara gave a small cry, while Radford muttered an oath under his breath. Poirot continued serenely. "And so, I ask your indulgence. For the present, I must request that none of you leave Greystone. The truth, it lies here, within these walls. To go away would be to risk obscuring it." The Major slammed his hand upon the table. "This is outrageous. We are prisoners in our own house." Poirot inclined his head. "Prisoners?" "None, Major. Guests. But guests with duties. For a crime has been committed, and until it is solved, suspicion rests upon each of you." Radford's eyes flashed. "Do you mean to say—" "I mean to say," Poirot interrupted gently, "that until I know who placed the fatal substance in Oliver's glass, I must consider you all capable. It is not pleasant, no. But truth, she is seldom pleasant." The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the steady patter of rain. One by one, the household rose from the table and dispersed, each retreating to their corner of the house. Only Poirot lingered, gazing thoughtfully into the fire. Clara's confession. Later that morning Clara sought him out in the small sitting room. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed from tears. She closed the door behind her, then came straight to Poirot. "Monsieur Poirot," she whispered, "I cannot bear this any longer. You must know, I quarrelled with Oliver the night before he died. I told him I hated him. I said I wished he were gone forever." Poirot regarded her gently. "And now you fear your words will be seen as guilt." "Yes. But I swear I had no hand in what happened. He mocked me, threatened father, and I lost my temper. That was all. Do you believe me?" Poirot leaned forward, taking her hand. "Mademoiselle, words spoken in anger are not the same as deeds. But tell me, when Oliver made his threats, did he speak of proof? Documents, letters, something tangible?" She nodded miserably. "Yes. He claimed he had papers locked in his case. He said he would expose father unless he was given money." "Papers, you say?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And where is this case now?" "I don't know. After the accident, it was never found." Poirot released her hand. "Merci, mademoiselle. You have told me something of the greatest importance. Go now, and do not fear. Hercule Poirot will find the truth." The Major's anger. That afternoon Poirot encountered Major Blackwood in the gun room, pacing like a caged animal. Still sniffing about, "Poirot," the Major demanded. "What do you hope to gain by keeping us penned here? If you've something to say, say it outright." Poirot spread his hands. "Very well. You hated Oliver Trent. You lost money to him, you accused him of cheating, and you threatened him. You are a soldier, Major, direct, impulsive. It would not surprise me if, in a fit of rage, you sought to rid yourself of him." The Major's face darkened. "Careful, Poirot. I've killed before, on the battlefield. But not like that. Not with tricks and powders in a glass. If I'd wanted Trent dead, I'd have called him out and had done with it. I'm no coward. Poirot nodded slowly. Ah, the honor. It is important to you. And yet, Major, honor can be twisted, especially when loyalty to a family is at stake. Would you kill to protect Sir Geoffrey, to protect Clara? For a moment the Major said nothing. His fists clenched, then he turned away. You twist everything, Poirot. I won't answer such questions. Poirot's moustaches twitched in satisfaction. Silence, after all, could be more revealing than denial. Radford's unease. It was in the library, however, that Poirot found the strongest reaction. Radford sat at the desk, papers spread before him, though his pen lay idle. Still working, monsieur? Poirot asked mildly. Trying to, but under the circumstances, Radford sighed. My practice suffers. My reputation, too, no doubt. And all because you insist on keeping us here. Your reputation, yes, Poirot said softly. A fine thing, reputation. So easily damaged. Especially if certain dealings with Oliver were to come to light. Radford's head jerked up. What do you mean? Only that Oliver was not discreet. He boasted, he threatened. Perhaps he threatened you, did he not? Documents in his possession, letters, such things could ruin a man of law. Radford's face drained of colour. You think I killed him to protect myself? Poirot's smile was faint. I think, monsieur, that you fear discovery. Whether for murder, or for something else, that is what I must determine. Radford pushed back his chair sharply. I will not be accused without proof, he snapped, then strode from the room, leaving Poirot alone with the scent of ink and tobacco. A storm at dinner. By evening the storm had worsened, battering the windows as the household gathered once more at dinner. Tension hung as thick as the candle smoke. Conversation was sparse, every remark seemed edged with suspicion. Poirot ate delicately, speaking little. But his eyes missed nothing, Clara's downcast face, Radford's twitching hands, Blackwood's restless glances, Sir Geoffrey's brooding silence. At last, as the plates were cleared, Poirot rose. My friends, he said, the truth comes closer. I feel it, like lightning in the air before the storm breaks. One among you knows that I speak truth. One among you placed the powder in Oliver's glass, thinking to mask murder as misfortune. But soon, very soon, that mask will be torn away. The candles flickered in the draught, shadows leaping across the panelled walls. A peal of thunder shook the house, and Clara gave a little scream. Sir Geoffrey pushed back his chair with a groan, pressing a hand to his brow. The net was tightening. The storm, both without and within, was near its height. And Poirot, serene amidst the turmoil, whispered to himself, Courage, Miss Amiss. The denouement, it approaches. Chapter 7, The Revelation approaches. The storm had passed in the night, leaving Greystone wrapped in a pale, exhausted silence. The rain-washed lawns glistened under a faint sun, and the air was sharp with the smell of wet earth. Yet inside the manor, the atmosphere was no lighter. If anything, the clearing of the skies only threw into sharper relief the cloud of unease that lingered over its inhabitants. Poirot, rising earlier than usual, had taken a solitary walk in the gardens. His polished shoes avoided the puddles with careful precision, and his thoughts moved as briskly as his steps. The pattern was nearly complete. The little grey cells, after days of patient labour, were stirring with certainty. What he required now was not more evidence, but the right moment to act. Patience, Hercule, he murmured. The threads, they are all in my hands. But to weave them into the final design, that requires theatre, timing, and just a little psychology. The missing case. Back inside, Poirot asked Benson the butler to attend him in the morning room. The solemn servant appeared promptly, his manner as grave as ever. "Benson," Poirot began, "I am in search of a travelling case belonging to Monsieur Oliver. Small, dark, and with a brass clasp. It was said to contain papers of some importance. Do you know of it?" Benson frowned. "I packed his things myself after the police returned what they recovered from the wreck. But there was no such case, sir. Only clothing, personal items. No lockbox." Poirot tapped his chin. "And yet, Mademoiselle Clara tells me Oliver spoke of papers, proof, he called it. They must be somewhere." Benson hesitated. "There is one thing, sir. On the night of the supper, after the toast, I saw Mr. Radford leave the room briefly. He was carrying a small case. I thought little of it, assumed he was assisting Mr. Trent. But now, perhaps it was that very item." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Merci, Benson. You are more observant than you know." Poirot and Radford again. Radford, when confronted, blustered. Poirot found him pacing the library, the fire burned low and neglected. "Radford," Poirot said softly, "I will save you embarrassment by being direct. You removed Oliver's case on the night of his death. Why?" The solicitor's face paled. Yes, I took it. But only to protect Sir Geoffrey. The boy claimed to have letters, scurrilous lies. I feared he might use them to blackmail his own father. So I secured the case." Poirot's brows rose. "And where is it now?" Radford hesitated, then sighed. "In my room. Locked away. I meant to return it after destroying the contents, but you have been watching us so closely." Poirot regarded him with narrowed eyes. "So? You admit you suppressed evidence? That is dangerous, monsieur, very dangerous. But more dangerous still is the thought that perhaps you did not only suppress, but killed, to prevent exposure." Radford's voice rose in agitation. "No. I may have been foolish, but I am not a murderer." Poirot said nothing more, only observed the man's trembling hands. Then, with a little nod, he turned away. Clara's resolve. Meanwhile, Clara had grown restless under the strain. She approached Poirot that afternoon, her voice urgent. "Monsieur Poirot, I must know. Do you suspect James Radford? I saw how you looked at him. If he is guilty, if he killed Oliver to protect us, then should we not be grateful?" Poirot fixed her with a stern gaze. "Mademoiselle, gratitude for murder? No, never. You think perhaps of duty, of loyalty. But murder, it corrupts even noble intentions. If Monsieur Radford is guilty, then he will be exposed. But do not mistake relief for justice." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "I only want it to end. The silence in this house is unbearable. Father grows weaker every day." Poirot's expression softened. "It will end soon, mademoiselle. The truth, she is close, very close." Blackwood's defiance. Later that day Poirot encountered Major Blackwood in the stables, where he stood staring at the restless horses. The Major turned as Poirot entered, his face drawn. "You've stirred up a hornet's nest, Poirot. Radford's near the breaking point. Clara looks fit to faint at every sound. And Geoffrey, he's a shadow of himself. Do you mean to keep this up until someone goes mad?" Poirot tilted his head. "Or until someone confesses, Major. You, for example, you had both quarrel and motive. Perhaps your loyalty to Sir Geoffrey led you too far." The Major gave a bitter laugh. "You think I'd slip powders into a man's glass? That's not my way. I face my enemies head on." Poirot studied him closely. "So you have said before. Yet remember, Major, Courage may wear many masks. Even the mask of silence. The Major's eyes narrowed. You're clever, Poirot. Too clever. But I'll tell you this, whoever did it, they won't confess. You'll have to drag it out of them. Poirot bowed slightly. Perhaps, Major. But Hercule Poirot, he knows how to drag. Sir Geoffrey's weakness. As dusk fell, Poirot at last turned again to Sir Geoffrey. He found him seated in his study, staring blankly at a portrait of his late wife. Sir Geoffrey, Poirot said gently, forgive me, but time presses. Oliver spoke of letters, of proof. They concerned you, did they not? Sir Geoffrey's hands trembled. Yes. They were old documents, foolish things from my youth. If made public, they would have ruined my standing. Oliver threatened to use them against me. He laughed in my face, demanded money. I could not bear it. Poirot leaned forward. And so? Did you act, Sir Geoffrey? The old man shook his head violently. No. Whatever my shame, I am no murderer. But I cannot help wishing he had never been born. Poirot's eyes softened. That wish, it is cruel, but not a crime. Rest, monsieur. The truth will come, and you will not face it alone. Poirot alone. When night fell and the house grew still, Poirot returned to his chamber. He arranged his brushes neatly upon the dressing table, smoothed his moustaches with care, and then seated himself at the window, gazing into the moonlit garden. The pieces lay before him, Oliver's threats, the missing case, Radford's theft, Clara's despair, Blackwood's rage, Sir Geoffrey's shame. Each had motive, each had opportunity. But motive alone did not kill. What is it, Hercule? Poirot whispered. What is the one detail, the one little thing, that reveals the hand behind the deed? His mind replayed the fatal toast. Oliver refusing, then persuaded. Radford pouring. The clouded glass. Oliver drinking, reluctantly. And then, the drive, the crash, the death. Suddenly Poirot's eyes lit with certainty. My's OUI. Of course. It is so simple. So simple that I nearly overlooked it. He rose, his step quick, his bearing triumphant. The stage was ready. Tomorrow, before them all, Hercule Poirot would reveal the murderer. Chapter 8, The Final Denouement. The following evening, as the grandfather clock in the hall struck 8, the household gathered in the drawing-room at Poirot's request. Outside, the night was cold and still, the garden silvered by moonlight. Within, the great fire burned low, throwing long shadows across the oak panels. It was the perfect stage, and Hercule Poirot, immaculate as ever, took his place at the hearth as though he were conductor of an orchestra about to begin the final movement. Sir Geoffrey sat slumped in his chair, his face lined with sorrow. Clara perched on the edge of the sofa, her hands clasped tightly. Major Blackwood stood by the mantel, arms folded, bristling with impatience. James Radford lingered near the door, his expression guarded. Benson the butler waited silently at the back of the room, his presence as grave and inevitable as the ticking of the clock. Poirot surveyed them with calm satisfaction. Miss Amos, he began, at last the moment has come. The truth, she has been elusive, but not invisible. Like the shadow of the owl upon the moonlit grass, she glides silently, yet she leaves her mark. And Hercule Poirot, he sees the mark. He allowed his words to settle, then continued. The reconstruction. Let us return, then, to the night of Sir Geoffrey's birthday. We were here, in this very room. The champagne was brought, the glasses filled. Yet note, it was not Benson the butler who poured for Oliver Trent. None. It was Monsieur James Radford. Radford shifted uneasily but said nothing. Poirot raised a finger. At first, this seems but courtesy. But Oliver's glass alone was clouded. Something had been added, a substance that dulled the senses, slowed the reflexes. Not enough to kill at once, but enough to make him a danger behind the wheel of his motorcar. His death was no accident. It was planned. A murmur went round the room. Clara gasped, while the Major muttered an oath. Poirot went on. Who had cause? Ah, but that is the difficulty. All of you, in your way, had motive. Clara, you feared exposure of your father's secret. Major Blackwood, you resented Oliver for cheating you at cards. Sir Geoffrey, you faced blackmail and humiliation. And Radford, Radford, you stood to lose both money and reputation. Truly, Miss Amos, the field was crowded. Red herrings. Poirot's voice softened. At first, I suspected Major Blackwood. He is a soldier, impulsive, with hot blood. But no, such a man kills openly, not with powders in a glass. His anger was real, but not his guilt. And then I considered Clara. Desperate, frightened, she spoke of wishing her brother gone. But her spirit is too gentle, her courage too slight for so subtle a crime. She wept, she despaired, but she did not kill. As for Sir Geoffrey, he had the strongest motive, yes. The blackmail of a son is a bitter thing. But he is a man of pride, not of calculation. He would have faced ruin before resorting to such deceit. His silence was of shame, not guilt. All eyes turned now to Radford, who had gone pale. The case and the papers. Poirot inclined his head. So we return to you, Monsieur Radford. You removed Oliver's case that very night, claiming to protect Sir Geoffrey. Perhaps that was true. But theft of the case does not explain the powder in the glass. For that, we must look deeper. You, Radford, are a man of the law. You understand appearances, discretion, subtlety. You would not strike with a pistol or a blow, you would seek a method that concealed itself as chance. And so you chose to drug Oliver. To make him seem merely drunk, reckless. To let the motorcar do the rest. Radford licked his lips. That is conjecture, Poirot. You have no proof. Poirot's trump card. Ah, but I have. Poirot's eyes gleamed. When Benson described the bottles, he spoke of a haze in one glass only. And when I examined the bottles myself, I saw faint residue clinging to the rim. I sent a portion quietly for analysis. Today, I received the answer. The substance was chloral hydrate, an old but effective sedative. And who, of this household, would know its use? Who would know how to procure it discreetly? The man of law, who keeps his contacts in every quarter. There was a sharp intake of breath from Clara. The Major uttered a low curse. Radford swayed as though struck. Poirot pressed on mercilessly. You see, Radford, only you had both the knowledge and the nerve. You poured the drink, you ensured Oliver swallowed it, you even removed the case to cover your tracks. But in your haste, you overlooked the cloudiness, the one small imperfection that betrayed you to Hercule Poirot. The confession. All eyes were on Radford now. He gripped the back of a chair, his knuckles white. At last he spoke, his voice hoarse. Yes. Yes, I did it. He would have destroyed us all, Geoffrey, Clara, myself. He had no decency, no restraint. He laughed while he threatened. So I acted. I thought it would be clean, no blood, no scandal. Just an accident. But I underestimated you, Poirot. Clara gave a cry and covered her face. Sir Geoffrey groaned, bowing his head. The Major muttered grimly, so it was you all along. Radford straightened, a bitter smile on his lips. Say what you will. I did it for loyalty. For honor. For this family. Poirot's gaze was steady. No, monsieur. You did it for yourself. The family, yes, but also your reputation, your pride. Always there is a selfish root. Do not clothe it in noble garments. Poirot's reflection. As Benson stepped forward to summon the authorities, Poirot spoke once more, his voice quiet but firm. Miss Amis, you see how it is with crime. Motives, they grow like weeds, money, fear, honor, shame. But only one among you had the mind to act with such cold calculation. It was not the quarrel of passion, nor the despair of weakness. It was the careful plan of a man who believed himself cleverer than chance. But there is always one cleverer still. And that, Miss Amis, is Hercule Poirot. He drew himself up, moustaches shining in the firelight, and the room sat in stunned silence. Outside, the night deepened, and with it the weight of revelation. Oliver Trent was avenged, his killer unmasked, and Greystone Manor would never again be the same.